Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Times Now with me, Priya Behel. And right on top of this bulletin, we are getting visuals of US President visiting Ukraine. The images on your screen are of US President Joe Biden, who has landed in a battle-hit Ukraine. Remember, it has been at war with Russia for months now. This visit was unknown to many people because it was a surprise visit to Kiev in what is looking like a show of solidarity as US President stands with a war-hit Ukraine, debilitated Ukraine that has been pounded by missiles as well as attacks from the army that has been deployed by Russia. US President Joe Biden today made a surprise visit to Kiev. This comes as he traveled to neighboring Poland to meet President Duda. My colleague Rishabh joins us for more details. Rishabh, was it actually a surprise visit or was it a surprise just for the people who are getting to see it now?
Well, Priya, this was not planned. Even White House itinerary that had come in for the president's visit to Europe did not have mention of visit to Ukraine. But since morning in the Ukrainian capital, there were buzz about an important guest landing by noon. And now we can confirm to our viewers that that important guest is Joe Biden, who has just landed 10 minutes ago in the Ukrainian capital, and this comes just ahead of the first anniversary of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Remember, last February, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the war has been going on since last 1 year. To show solidarity, we have seen German Chancellor visiting Kyiv and Ukraine President visiting London as well, and now this important visit.
And the optics here are going to be very, very significant. And to help us understand that, I'm now joined by Maruf Raza. Sir, it's over to you. This visit comes just days after US has already said that it fears that China might be supplying weapons to Russia. And now we see US President standing with Ukraine in this hour of crisis.
See, I am looking at the first anniversary of Ukraine's the conflict and Russia's invasion with multiple dimensions. One is that the US initially became a very big champion of Ukraine's fight back against Russia, and the US was hoping that the supplies provided by US of weapons and money, along with European countries, would cripple Russia. That hasn't happened. So a lot of countries and objective analysis in the West is leading us to believe that there is a thin line between the conflict continuing endlessly and the conflict escalating hopelessly high. So which way it will go from now, because as the summer sets in, this is the time when Russia would be able to exploit the territory for greater invasion. We'll have to wait and watch. The second thing is, America has been a big champion of the fight of Ukraine against Russia because it has also allowed America to return back to Europe as the leader of Europe, which was looking for leadership. So to that extent, it has worked well in the favor of Mr. Biden. And the Ukrainian President, Mr. Zelenskyy, has made an official visit to the US. He has also been engaging with the European powers, but there were divided opinions in Europe about what kind of weapon systems to give to the Ukrainians to fight back. For example, the Ukrainians have been asking for F-16 fighter jets from America, which America has refused. But the Ukrainians are now likely to get supplies of tanks and other missile systems from Germany and France. The people who are caught up in the conflict are the people of Ukraine, who have shown a lot of courage, determination to fight back, but their country is destroyed, and this has not happened since the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, when Iraq wanted to do away with the country from the world map. And the Russian invasion of Ukraine was intended with a similar purpose. That has not been achieved. So right now, everyone's report card is 50 to 70% nearer what their targets were. There is no clear winner. There is no clear loser. China, even if it gets involved in supplying Russia with ammunition, will do it so discreetly that the West will never be able to nail China, regardless of what Mr. Blinken's warnings are. China anyway doesn't take American warnings too seriously. What America is having a problem is meeting up with the supplies of ammunition that Ukraine is asking, because frankly, America doesn't produce very much more than what it has been supplying to the Ukrainians. So if there isn't enough ammunition, the Ukrainians will have to find other ways to resist the Russians, and this will have to be supplies from Germany, France, and some other European countries. The world has gone into a kind of complacency with the conflict in Ukraine, because the world is not now very sure what could be the final outcome, despite promises of America to cripple the Russian economy. Russia has shown that it hasn't been crippled. It will continue to churn along. So the sanctions haven't really worked the way the Americans wanted to. So there are a lot of issues that are there, and none of them have very clear answers. Most importantly, that the UN has failed to play a proactive role to stop the conflict, because a Security Council member has flouted the rules of engagement that the UN was meant to work with. So with all that, Mr. Biden's visit is symbolic, but I don't think beyond that, America can alter the course of Russia's intentions or its invasion.
Right, and Russia has clearly made its intentions clear, because it is getting closer and closer to China, because even as we speak, there are reports that are coming in that a top diplomat from China is going to be in Moscow for a quick huddle. But Mr. Raza, would you say that as this war enters its second year now, it is perhaps this fatigue that made this trip something that needed to happen at this point in time? We've seen several people from the US, several representatives, including Mrs. Biden, paying a visit to Ukraine. The defense secretary was also there at some point in time last year. But the president himself going there at this particular time, the timing has to be very, very significant for sending a message, not only to Russia, but to other countries also, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, the big question doing the rounds in international politics is how much of a Ukraine fatigue has been reached and how much can it be turned around. And I think to that extent, Mr. Biden's visit to Ukraine will alter the course of the debate. It will re-energize interest in the subject of Ukraine, where many countries had begun to look at it as though it's a conflict which is happening in the sideshow. The bigger conflict was about big power rivalry, that is Russia-US rivalry and US-China rivalry. Ukraine became the battleground for that. But Ukraine, the outcome of the conflict, or to what extent Russia is willing to go, will really define the future of world politics in the next decade or two.
Right. Who would have imagined that this war that started last year in February would last a year? It was almost being seen as a David versus Goliath battle, but Goliath is still being stalled by David, and it is because of support of countries like the US and others. Thank you, Mr. Raza, for joining me on this broadcast with your deep insights. But we move on to another story that has